6 years after his younger brother died on a job Roman Castellano had personally ordered him onto, and Roman had not genuinely smiled once since. Tonight a woman he had never met walked into the cafe he owned and barely visited, carrying a tray of cinnamon rolls, and something in his chest cracked open for the first time in longer than he wanted to measure. Drop a comment and tell us where you are watching from tonight, because what happens after that tray hits the counter is going to change everything Roman thought he understood about moving forward. Roman Castellano ran the largest waste management and logistics operation in the city, a business that on paper handled municipal contracts and commercial hauling and, beneath that careful surface, handled considerably more delicate arrangements that kept a significant portion of the city's underground economy quietly functioning. He was 37, tall, broad through the shoulders, dark hair cropped close, a face that had once been easy and quick to smile before 6 years of careful, deliberate control had settled permanently into his features instead. A thin scar crossed his left eyebrow, a leftover from the same night that had taken his younger brother Nico, a night Roman had spent every year since replaying in careful, punishing detail. Nico had been 24, eager, talented, desperate to prove himself worthy of the family name, and Roman had sent him on a routine collection that should never have gone wrong. A job Roman himself would normally have handled personally if a competing family dispute had not pulled his attention elsewhere that same evening. The collection had gone wrong in ways nobody had anticipated, and Nico had not come home. Roman had spent the 6 years since holding himself entirely responsible, methodically stripping away anything in his life that resembled softness, joy, or genuine connection, as though denying himself happiness was somehow a fitting penance for the brother he had failed to protect. He owned a small cafe near the waterfront, inherited from his grandmother, that he kept running purely out of stubborn family obligation, visiting perhaps twice a year, letting his staff manage every detail without his involvement. He had not set foot inside it in nearly 8 months when circumstances, a scheduling conflict with the cafe's longtime manager, forced him to personally oversee a delivery inspection on an otherwise unremarkable Tuesday morning. Hazel Whitmore had been baking professionally since she was 19, plus-size, warm hazel eyes that matched her name, dark blonde hair usually pulled back in a practical braid dusted faintly with flour by mid-morning, a laugh that came easily and often, the kind of woman who filled a room with warmth before anyone fully registered she had walked into it. She was 29, confident in the specific way of someone who had built her small baking business from a card table at farmers markets into a genuine, thriving wholesale operation supplying half the cafes and restaurants in the historic district, including, as of 6 months earlier, the small waterfront cafe that belonged, though she had never once met him, to a man named Roman Castellano. She arrived that particular Tuesday morning with her usual delivery, 2 trays of cinnamon rolls, a box of scones, fresh sourdough loaves still warm from the oven, expecting the same easy exchange with the cafe's regular staff she had grown accustomed to over the past 6 months. Instead, she found an unfamiliar man behind the counter, tall and severe in a dark coat despite the mild spring morning, reviewing invoices with the particular focused intensity of someone who clearly did not want to be interrupted. "Delivery for Castellanos," Hazel said, setting the trays carefully on the counter, unbothered by his obvious lack of welcome. "You are new, or considerably more dressed up than the usual morning crowd around here." Roman looked up, something in his controlled expression flickering with mild surprise at being addressed so directly and easily by a stranger. "I own this cafe," he said, "though I imagine that answer confuses you further rather than less." "A little," Hazel admitted, unpacking the trays with practiced efficiency. The owner I have been told about, secondhand, mostly, sounded considerably more distant than someone standing here personally checking invoices at 7 in the morning. Something crossed Roman's face, quick and complicated, gone before Hazel could fully read it. "The owner does not usually visit," he said. "Circumstances required it today." Hazel studied him for a moment, the same careful, assessing attention she gave a difficult batch of dough that was not rising the way it should, trying to identify exactly what was missing before deciding how to fix it. "Well," she said finally, "for whatever it is worth, these cinnamon rolls are considerably better appreciated in person than secondhand through staff reports. Try one while they are still warm." She did not wait for permission, simply broke off a piece and held it out to him, and something in the easy, unbothered confidence of the gesture, a woman entirely unintimidated by his careful, controlled presence, caught Roman genuinely off guard. He took the piece more out of surprise than actual hunger, and ate it, and the specific, unexpected quality of it, warm and rich and considerably better than anything he had eaten in longer than he wanted to consider, pulled something loose in his chest that he had kept carefully locked down for 6 years. If you have ever watched someone taste something good for the first time in years and genuinely register it, you already understand exactly what was happening behind Roman Castellano's carefully controlled expression in that exact moment. "That is genuinely excellent," he said, and the words came out rougher than he intended, surprised at his own reaction bleeding into his voice. "I know," Hazel said, entirely without false modesty, a small satisfied smile crossing her face. "It is why half the cafes in this district fight over my delivery schedule." Something at the corner of Roman's mouth moved, the barest suggestion of an expression he had not fully allowed himself in 6 years. There and gone so quickly that even Hazel, watching him closely, was not entirely certain she had seen it at all. "I need to finish these invoices," Roman said, the careful control settling back over his features. "Thank you for the delivery." "Of course," Hazel said, gathering her empty crates, though something in her expression suggested she had noticed considerably more than Roman intended to reveal. "I will see you next Tuesday, Mr. Castellano, whether you are here personally or not." She left, and Roman stood alone in the small cafe for a long moment afterward, turning over the strange, unfamiliar sensation sitting in his chest, something that felt, unervingly, like the first genuine warmth he had allowed himself to feel in 6 long years. The following Tuesday, Roman found himself at the cafe again, an hour before opening, telling himself it was simply another scheduling necessity even though the manager had returned from her conflict days earlier. Hazel arrived at her usual time, her expression flickering briefly with surprise before settling into something warmer. "You are here again," she said, setting down her trays. "Should I be concerned my invoices are becoming genuinely fascinating reading material, or is there another reason? Perhaps I wanted to see if the cinnamon rolls were as good as I remembered," Roman said, something dry and almost playful in his tone that surprised him even as he said it. Hazel's eyebrows rose slightly, clearly registering the shift in him even if she did not fully understand its significance. "Well," she said, breaking off another piece and handing it to him without hesitation, "let us find out." They fell into an easy rhythm over the following weeks, Roman finding increasingly transparent reasons to be present for Hazel's Tuesday deliveries, their conversations deepening gradually from careful small talk into something considerably more honest. Hazel learned that Roman rarely visited the cafe his grandmother had built, though she did not yet understand the full weight of why. Roman learned that Hazel had built her entire business from nothing after her own mother's long illness had left the family with considerable debt. A fierce determination to build something entirely her own driving every decision she had made since. One particular Tuesday, arriving earlier than usual, Roman found Hazel already deep in conversation with an elderly regular customer, patiently helping the woman choose between 2 pastries while asking careful, genuine questions about her week. Roman watched from the doorway for several minutes before Hazel noticed him, struck by the specific ease with which she moved through the world, fully present with everyone she encountered rather than simply performing politeness. "You do that with everyone," he observed once the customer had left, settling and pleased with her selection. "Do what?" Hazel asked, wiping down the counter. "Actually listen," Roman said. "Most people simply wait for their turn to speak. You genuinely listen." Hazel considered that for a moment. "My mother taught me that, I think, without ever explicitly saying it. She spent the last 2 years of her illness surrounded by people who talked at her constantly, filling every silence out of their own discomfort rather than actually being present with her. I decided a long time ago I did not want to be that kind of person for anyone." Something shifted behind Roman's careful expression, a recognition passing between them that neither one commented on directly. "I imagine that is a considerably harder discipline than it sounds," he said quietly. "It is," Hazel agreed. "But it matters. People remember who actually showed up for them, in the small moments as much as the large ones. You do not smile easily," Hazel observed one Tuesday morning, 6 weeks into their growing acquaintance, watching him carefully as she arranged the morning's delivery. "I have noticed. I am not asking you to explain it. I am simply telling you I have noticed." Something tightened behind Roman's careful expression. It has been a difficult 6 years, he said finally, with more honesty in his voice than he had allowed a near stranger in longer than he could accurately remember. I lost someone important to me. I have not fully found my way back to easy things since. Hazel set down the tray she was holding, giving him her full, careful attention. I am sorry, she said simply, no pity in her voice, only genuine understanding. That is not a small thing to carry alone for 6 years. No, Roman agreed quietly. It is not. That is exactly where the Real story begins to shift. And if you want to see how far this goes before Roman finally learns to smile again completely, stay with it, because the next several weeks are going to test both of them in ways neither one expects. Over the following weeks, Roman found himself, for the first time in 6 years, genuinely looking forward to something beyond simply managing the careful machinery of his business. The specific anticipation of Tuesday mornings and easy conversation with a woman who never once flinched from his careful reserve, who simply, patiently, kept offering warmth without demanding he explain himself before earning it. He told her, slowly, in careful pieces over several weeks, about Nico, about the job he had sent his younger brother on, about 6 years of believing that denying himself joy was somehow an appropriate penance for a mistake he could never undo. One evening, sitting together on the small back patio of the café after closing, Roman brought out an old photograph he had kept folded in his wallet for 6 years, worn soft at the creases from handling. He showed it to Hazel without explanation at first, simply setting it on the table between them, a young man grinning widely at the camera, dark hair, familiar eyes. That is Nico, he said finally. 2 weeks before. He wanted to be exactly like me growing up. I used to think that was something to be proud of. Now I mostly think about how much better his life would have been if he had wanted almost anything else instead. Hazel studied the photograph carefully, then looked up at Roman with genuine warmth rather than pity. He looks like he was happy, she said. Genuinely happy, not performing it for the camera. That kind of smile is hard to fake. He was, Roman admitted, something raw moving across his face. Right up until the night he was not anymore. Tell me about him, Hazel said gently. Not the night you lost him. Him. Who he actually was before that. Something in Roman's chest loosened at the specific gentleness of the request. An invitation nobody had offered him in 6 years. Everyone else always circling carefully around Nico's death rather than asking about his life. He talked for nearly an hour, about Nico's terrible taste in music, his stubborn insistence on trying to cook despite genuinely limited skill, the specific way he had laughed, loud and unself-conscious, at almost everything. You are smiling right now, Hazel said quietly, partway through a story about Nico attempting, disastrously, to bake a birthday cake for their mother. Talking about him. Do you realize that? Roman stopped, genuinely surprised, touching his own face as though checking whether she was accurate. I had not noticed, he admitted. That is what I mean, Hazel said, about carrying him without letting the loss be the only thing you carry. He clearly deserves to be remembered as someone who made people laugh, not only as someone whose death you have spent 6 years punishing yourself over. Something shifted permanently in Roman's chest at that observation. A door that had been sealed shut for 6 years easing open by a careful inch. I do not know how to simply stop carrying the guilt, he admitted quietly. You do not have to stop carrying it entirely, Hazel said. You simply have to stop letting it be the only thing you carry. There is room for both, Roman. The grief and the good memories. You have simply been refusing yourself the second one. 3 months into their careful, deepening connection, Roman arrived at Hazel's small bakery unannounced on a Thursday evening, something tense visible behind his usually controlled expression. This is unexpected, Hazel said, immediately reading the tension in his shoulders as she set down the piping bag she had been using. What happened? There is a man named Dominic Salvi, Roman said, sitting across from her, choosing his words with visible care. He has spent the last several months trying to force my organization out of territory my family has controlled for 2 generations. Yesterday, one of my warehouses was vandalized. Minor damage, but the message was unmistakable. He wants my attention, and he is escalating deliberately to get it. Hazel's expression sharpened with immediate, careful focus. You think this involves me somehow? Not yet, Roman said. But men like Salvi understand exactly how to locate someone's genuine vulnerabilities. If he learns how much time I have been spending here, learns that you matter to me, he will not hesitate to use that as leverage. Something familiar and unwelcome rose in Hazel's chest. You are considering pulling away, she said, to protect me without asking what I actually want in the matter. I considered it, Roman admitted, distancing myself until this resolves, to keep you clear of danger that has nothing to do with you and everything to do with who I am. And what did you decide? Hazel asked, watching him carefully. I decided that would be exactly the kind of decision that assumes you cannot handle the truth of a difficult situation, Roman said, which is not something I want to be with you specifically. Tell me if I am wrong to think that. Something eased in Hazel's expression, genuine respect settling into her features. You are not wrong, she said. Tell me everything, and let us figure out together what happens next. I did not build an entire business from a card table at farmers markets by running from difficult problems. If you thought Roman had already learned everything this story had to teach him about moving forward, stay with this, because what happens over the following weeks tests both of them considerably further than either expects. Over the following days, Hazel found herself drawn into the careful mechanics of the threat with the same methodical attention she brought to a difficult recipe that was not behaving the way it should, asking questions that cut past the surface tension into the actual pattern underneath it. You said Salvi wants your attention, she said one evening, reviewing a rough timeline Roman had sketched out for her at her kitchen table, flour still faintly dusting her hands. But the warehouse damage was minor, deliberately so, it sounds like. That is not the profile of someone trying to seriously hurt your operation. That is the profile of someone testing exactly how you respond under pressure before he commits to something larger. Roman looked up sharply, something recalculating behind his careful eyes. You think this is reconnaissance? I think it is worth considering, Hazel said, instead of assuming the obvious explanation is the only one available. In baking, when something goes wrong in a way that does not quite make sense, it is almost never the ingredient everyone blames first. It is usually something upstream nobody bothered examining closely enough. Roman's second in command, a steady, careful man named Gio who had worked for the Castellano family for nearly 20 years, reviewed Hazel's reasoning the following morning with visible surprise before nodding slowly. She may have a point, boss. We have been treating this as a direct territorial challenge. If it is actually a test of your reactions, we have already given him considerable information about exactly how you respond under pressure. Over the following days, Hazel found herself increasingly drawn into the careful mechanics of the investigation, not out of any desire to be involved in Roman's world directly, but because her particular skill for noticing inconsistencies, honed over years of troubleshooting difficult recipes and managing a demanding wholesale schedule, kept catching details Roman's own experienced team had moved past too quickly. Something about this timeline bothers me, she said one evening, studying the pattern of incidents Roman had documented. Laid across her kitchen table alongside a half-finished batch of scones she had abandoned mid-preparation to focus fully on the problem. Look at the spacing between each incident. They are not random. They follow almost exactly the same interval each time, 11 or 12 days apart, consistently. Roman studied the timeline with new attention. Meaning this does not feel like organic escalation, Hazel said. Organic escalation from genuine frustration tends to be irregular, faster when someone is angry, slower when they are reconsidering. This is disciplined, methodical. Someone is following a deliberate schedule, which suggests considerably more calculation than a man simply losing patience with a territorial dispute. Gio, present for the conversation, leaned forward with genuine interest. She might be onto something, boss. That kind of discipline usually points to someone testing a hypothesis rather than simply reacting emotionally. Testing what hypothesis? Roman asked. I think Hazel said slowly, working through it as she spoke. He might be testing whether you have a genuine weakness he can eventually exploit, rather than trying to seize the territory directly through force. Each incident probably tells him something new about how you respond, who you contact afterward, how quickly you recover your composure. He is building a profile of you methodically, the same way I test a recipe repeatedly until I understand exactly how it behaves under different conditions. Something shifted behind Roman's careful expression, genuine unease mixing with growing respect. If that is accurate, then my instinct to escalate directly would have played exactly into what he wanted, confirming whatever weakness he was testing for. Which is exactly why patience matters here, Hazel said. Not simply as a passive strategy, but as an active refusal to give him the data he is trying to collect. Following Hazel's careful reasoning, Roman made the deliberate choice to refuse every opportunity Salvi offered to escalate directly, continuing his life and his growing relationship with Hazel openly, denying Salvi the reaction his entire strategy appeared to depend on. Weeks passed in tense, careful quiet, Roman and Hazel using the time to grow considerably closer, their careful partnership deepening into something neither of them fully named yet, though both of them felt its weight settling into place. During this period, Roman found himself relying on Hazel's careful perspective in ways that surprised him considerably, bringing pieces of the situation to her not because he needed her permission for his decisions, but because her outside view, uncomplicated by years of assumptions built up within his own organization, consistently sharpened his own thinking. "You have an unusual gift for this," Roman said one evening, watching her work through another piece of the puzzle with the same patient attention she gave a difficult loaf of bread. "I do not think you fully realize how rare it is, someone who can look at a genuinely dangerous situation and simply, calmly, take it apart piece by piece." "I do not think of it as unusual," Hazel said. "I think of it as exactly the same skill that keeps a bakery running. You cannot panic when a batch fails. You have to figure out precisely what went wrong, methodically, or you repeat the same mistake indefinitely. Danger is not so different, underneath the fear. I have spent 20 years surrounded by men trained specifically for situations like this," Roman said, "and none of them see it as clearly as you do without any of that training." "Maybe that is exactly why," Hazel said. "I am not inside the fear the way your team is. That distance lets me see the actual shape of the problem instead of only its danger." "I have been thinking," Hazel said one evening, several weeks into this careful standoff, sitting across from Roman in the quiet cafe after hours, the space finally beginning to feel, for the first time in years, like somewhere Roman genuinely wanted to be rather than simply a business obligation he tolerated. "About what you said, about carrying Nico's memory without letting it be the only thing you carry." "And?" Roman asked. "I think you are doing it," Hazel said, slowly. "I have watched you smile in this cafe 3 times this month. Actual smiles, not the careful ones you give when you think someone is watching." Something warm moved across Roman's face at that observation, genuine and unguarded. "I have noticed it too," he admitted. "I did not expect to find my way back to this. I certainly did not expect a baker with a card table's worth of stubborn determination to be the reason I did." "I will take that as a compliment," Hazel said, smiling. "It is meant entirely as one," Roman said. The break in the Salvi situation came without warning 6 weeks later, through information Joe's careful surveillance finally uncovered, confirming exactly what Hazel had suspected from the beginning. Salvi's own organization had grown considerably more fractured over recent months. Several of his own lieutenants reportedly unhappy with a leader who had escalated against a family as established as the Castellanos over territory that, by most calculations, was not actually worth the considerable risk involved. "If his own people already doubt this decision," Hazel said, reviewing the intelligence with the same careful attention she gave everything, "then Salvi is not operating from strength. He is operating from desperation, trying to prove something to his own organization rather than because the territory genuinely matters that much to him personally." Roman considered this carefully, something settling behind his eyes. "If that is accurate, then the smartest move remains exactly what we have already been doing. Patience. Let his own instability work against him without giving him the direct conflict he needs to justify the risk he has already taken." That patient strategy proved correct over the following month, Salvi's organization fracturing further under the weight of his own increasingly reckless decisions, until word finally reached Roman that 2 of Salvi's most trusted lieutenants had defected entirely, unwilling to continue following a leader whose judgment they had started seriously questioning. Within weeks, the threat to Roman's operation had effectively dissolved, resolved not through violence or direct confrontation, but through the patient, careful strategy Hazel had helped him build from the very beginning. Roman arrived at Hazel's bakery on a quiet evening shortly after, the tension of the past months finally, genuinely lifted from his shoulders. "It is over," he said, sitting across from her at her small kitchen table. "Confirmed this afternoon." Salvi's organization has effectively collapsed. There is no more threat. Relief visibly settled through Hazel's shoulders. Good, she said simply, meaning it completely. She reached across the table and took his hand, studying him carefully. How do you feel, actually? Not the careful answer. The real one. Roman considered the question seriously, turning it over the way he had learned to do from watching her work through difficult problems these past months. Lighter, he said finally. For the first time in longer than I can accurately measure. Not because the danger is gone, though that helps. Because I stopped facing it alone, in silence, the way I faced everything for 6 years after Nico. Roman studied her for a long moment, 6 years of careful isolation finally, fully behind him, replaced by something he had not expected to feel again in his lifetime. I need to tell you something, he said, his voice rougher than usual. I spent 6 years certain that whatever joy I was owed in this life had already been forfeited the night I lost my brother. That smiling genuinely, easily, was something I no longer had any right to. And now, Hazel asked gently. Now I find myself planning entire weeks around Tuesday mornings, Roman said, which terrifies me considerably more than Dominic Salvi ever managed to. I did not expect to feel this again. I am not certain I fully know how to hold it without also holding the fear of somehow failing it, the way I failed Nico. Hazel rose and came around the table, taking his hands in hers. You are not going to fail this, she said quietly, because this time you are not carrying it alone in silence. That is the entire difference, Roman. That has always been the entire difference. He pulled her closer, resting his forehead against hers, something in his chest finally, fully unclenching after 6 long years of careful distance. I love you, he said, the words landing plainly and completely. I did not think I would find my way back to being able to say that to anyone. I am saying it to you, and I mean every part of it. I love you too, Hazel said, her voice warm and certain. I have for a while now, watching you slowly remember how to smile again, one Tuesday at a time. He kissed her then, slow and certain, 6 years of careful silence finally giving way to something neither of them intended to let go of easily. For months later, Roman stood behind the counter of his grandmother's café on an ordinary Tuesday morning, an apron tied over his usually careful dark clothes, helping Hazel unload the morning's delivery himself, something he had started doing weeks earlier simply because he no longer wanted an excuse to visit the place his grandmother had built. He had reopened it fully under his own careful attention now, the small waterfront café slowly becoming, again, exactly the warm, welcoming space it had been before 6 years of grief had made him abandon it. Gio stopped by that same morning, ostensibly to discuss a minor logistics matter, though Roman suspected, from the faint amusement in his old friend's expression, that the actual purpose was simply to witness the sight of his boss in an apron, arranging pastries with genuine care. Gio said nothing about it directly, only accepted a cinnamon roll from Hazel with a small, knowing smile before heading back out, leaving Roman faintly embarrassed and entirely unbothered by it at the same time. He is going to tell everyone in the organization about this, Roman said, watching Joe's car pull away from the curb. Good, Hazel said, unbothered, arranging the display case with practiced efficiency. Let them know. You spent 6 years letting people believe you had forgotten how to be anything other than careful and controlled. It is about time they saw the rest of you too. You are staring, Hazel said, not looking up from the tray of cinnamon rolls she was arranging, a small smile already tugging at her mouth. I am simply appreciating exactly what I almost never got back, Roman said. This place. This feeling. You. Good, Hazel said, finally looking up at him, warmth spreading across her face. Keep appreciating it. I plan on being around a very long time to make sure you never forget how. If this story found you the way it found us while writing it, hit that like button, tell us in the comments what you think finally taught Roman how to smile again, and subscribe for more stories exactly like this one.